Hey guys, so today I'm going to take all of these witch concepts that I've made using AI and try to dial in um, which pieces of what I want to use, right? Whether, I want to steal particular accessories or the dress types from certain ones, whether the weapon or the armor is something that's appealing, right? I want to start eliminating pieces and putting things together. So I've pasted all of my AI generated images onto this really big, ginormous image here. And what I'm going to do is set up some front side views over here so that I can decide which pieces from what I'm going to use. Now, I could still make my life easier by cheating a bit and using some of these existing front and side poses for the ones where it came out really nice. If they've captured a good silhouette, like only a couple of these managed to capture a proper side pose, but most of them have a good front pose, or at least a three-quarter pose that I will then translate into a more flattened orthographic view of the front pose, right? So some of the stuff that I'm seeing from my experiments that tends to be working for me is I like the oversized hat style. I also like these gold embellishments along the edges of the dress, almost like solid pieces. I'm a bit wary of doing a black on black design. I want to try to bring some more color in here. And I have been playing Harry Potter, which does Hogwarts Legacy, which does a good job of bringing in more color elements to witches' outfits, right? Their witches and wizards are have kind of like house colors, and then they also have explorer outfits and different outfits that are going to accomplish different things. Other themes that I'm enjoying from the dresses are this kind of like layered approach, with the side skirts maybe being armored with armor plated pauldrons, and then kind of an inner layer skirt there. Once I get into Maya, I'll probably be experimenting with end cloth a little bit more, just to catch some of these nice flowy shapes. End cloth will simulate the cloth flowing over the character, and so I'll have to have some shapes underneath to keep it shapely, or to keep those shapes solid. Then for the final version, once it has a skeleton and a skin attached to it, right? The skin binds the skeleton to the mesh. Then I'll also be making bones through the character in the dress area, right? So the dress will have to have its own bone links in order to simulate the physics of the dress inside of Unity. So that part I have not gotten as far on in the past. Typically it's kind of been a wish list item for me, so I'll try to get to some of that this time. Here's one of the ones that looks more complete. Oh, actually, I didn't notice this sword with the candle at the end. That's pretty funky looking. I do want like a hot poker, like a fireplace poker kind of weapon for her. And I do like these kind of gothic styles on the fronts and things of the dress. Some of them are quite elaborate. So I do need to make some decisions here of like how crazy I want to get. Sometimes, you know, in order to simplify a little bit, I might just grab pieces or even grab entire characters. So in this case, like this back view with this crazy horned type of helmet might be a good starting point for a silhouette. And for the relative size of the hat, right, it's almost as tall as she is from the side. Oops, darn. Alright, so I can start pulling in maybe some of the hats that I like. These three here, I think, were the ones that I targeted. And this one keeps jumping out at me as far as my favorite, so merged. Get a hat in there. Maybe erase the head just so it's not distracting. There were a couple of slightly different dress designs that I thought had some cool stuff going on, right? For the dress, that's going to be one of the harder decisions to make is, you know, how much work do I want to leave myself for the final stages. So maybe I'll pick my favorite weapons first. Probably this style of candelabra. Again, kind of like a hot iron poker. So a similar looking dress. I like this one as well with the sword at the bottom. This one was the other one. So maybe a combination of these two dresses. This one, the floaty type one, also came out quite nice. This design has a lot of elements actually that I like. I also have to make a decision where I want kind of the softer flower petal type of shoulders or the spikier, more aggressive style battle mage. That's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. This one has a nice merger of the two, actually. Here I've got a good side view, so I want to start maybe targeting ones that at least have a side view. Again, I'm trying to avoid like sexy witch tropes a little bit. I want to go more just middle of the road or without much sex appeal. Right, they can look good, but they shouldn't be like busting out of their dress or anything. Right, another side view, not as interesting, but I do like some of these with the glowing piece in the middle of the dress. Here, this one is much more traditional, but something about this one grabbed me. Sometimes, right, if I'm looking at something and I'm not quite sure what is the part that I like, sometimes I'll just cover parts of the model, right, see what it is that's appealing about it by isolating different parts. So it's not really the dress, it's this, probably the creepy skull and the hat without the brim, right? It also kind of looks like a Ku Klux Klan hood, which obviously is quite scary. I do like this kind of full lantern thing that she's carrying, so I'm gonna grab that. I don't know if I'll go full on with that one. Now, there's also a hat somewhere I had spotted previously in my Generations that had like a really cool split down the center. I don't know if it was one of these. Somewhere in this era where I think the one that I was looking at actually had a cut right down the middle. This one's got some nice embellishments on it. Right, so this stage, it's gonna take a while just because I'm staying in kind of a judgment mode, right? I have to like keep the creative side of my brain judging things and making decisions like, oh, is that cool, or is this where I want to go with it, right? That can be tiring, right? You're engaging like the right side of your brain quite intensely here. So some nice elements on this 3/4 view. Again, sometimes I'm not quite sure what it is that's grabbing me about it. And I might do my cover-up trick just to see what it is. Boy, these crazy pauldrons. The dress as well. I think it's the balance of maybe the pauldrons and the wide cuffs. Some interesting shapes going on there, or at least a good balance, right, between kind of spiky shapes. Let me see if I can find that other hat. Yeah, it's got buried somewhere, so I'll stick with a more traditional hat then, just because I also want it to read quickly. I don't know if I'm gonna make this necessarily like a main character. It probably could be a player character, or it might stay as like an enemy or something like that. So often when I'm working at this stage, I will, like you can see, just dump a bunch of images. I'll hit C for the crop tool, making sure that my background is set to white, and then I can increase the size of my image quickly, like so. Now, one thing that I want to do at this stage, or once I've gone through a reference run, is to actually draw my character next to my artwork rather than on top, or copy and pasting until I get something is not a very good method. Rather, I want to have my artwork next to my drawing and refer to it, but not to be reliant too much on the drawing. Now I think my when I plugged in my pen, I already had Photoshop running. So I'm just going to restart Photoshop so that I can make sure that my pressure sensitivity is working. It's not always going to come through if I plug in the hardware after I start the software. So let me just restart Photoshop. Alrighty guys, I took a bit of a break, but ready to continue. What I'm going to do now is set up a new layer that'll be my artwork layer to start with, because like I mentioned, I want to start actually drawing my model. Now, if you are not warmed up, like I am not, my lines are going to be very ugly, right? What I suggest is, instead of trying to work in detail mode, is to consider doing the silhouette first. So this is also what I talked about, I think a week or two ago in class, right, is using shape language to kind of set up your character mood. Pointed shapes being more abrasive personalities perhaps, or dangerous characters, right? Rounder shapes being more inviting, and squarish shapes being more steadfast or solid or unwavering, right? Unchanging type of characters. So if I look at the shapes that are on the witch, obviously we got a lot of triangles being the head, and the overall silhouette really is following a sort of triangular shape, right? So I can capture the big shapes through triangles. I don't want to get too reliant on those though, so I am going to look at maybe inverting triangles, right, to do an hourglass shape for the body. I could accentuate things with shoulder pads, like I've been looking at shoulder pads, and then maybe almost softening shapes, maybe with internal shapes. So I'm looking at something almost like this, where it's almost a squared off triangle for the dress shape, right? Like if I go more of a rounded shape, right, this is where you get to more of like a gown, like a princess gown. And don't be afraid to work in negatives as well. Like you could also work by erasing. Also, if I run out of space, I quickly just swap to my crop tool, C, and move it up so I don't have to go into any menus or anything like that, right? So potentially something like this, right, is going to be the overall silhouette on my character. I'm also going to be working in an A pose, right, rather than a T pose, because this artwork potentially is what I take forward into 3D. Right. So swap back and forth between your eraser, right, and your large brush to start with. And again, at first I'm going to need to warm up my wrist, right, my hand, as I've not been drawing. I've been reliant on AI in a sense that I've been really enjoying the types of outputs that it's giving me, but it does mean that I haven't drawn in a while, right? Also noticing some of the square shapes that are coming up right in the middle here. I don't necessarily want to erase those in pure white, but I might want to say use a mid-gray just as a breakup color. Right, once I've got kind of the overall shape in there, I can experiment with where the details are going to be, or where the additional sort of internal shape language could occur, right? So making sure that I'm also complementing the anatomy of my character, right, in addition to you know, creating shape language that is consistent with the kind of personality that I want in this character, right? Even noticing having this rounded shapes now, making the character feel more inviting, right? By having this rounded shape. So if I want to square things off and make them feel more aggressive or more imposing, right? Like just squaring things off or adding additional details. Like notice in some of these that use kind of a tattered or even like a very spiky bottom, right? Can also create an effect. So at this stage, right, I'm not worrying about, oh, I don't know how to draw a face, oh, I have to draw the fingers, how am I going to do that, right? Don't get into critical mode quite yet, but just working on the vibe of the character using the concept art that you've got, right? And experimenting with these kinds of this shape language, right? So make sure that kind of stay aware of this as we go through. So this also can mean that it translates within the character, right? But you can have elements within the character. I'm seeing a lot of these shapes here is kind of this pauldron shape is kind of also triangle here with maybe some spikes coming off of it right at the top. So before I'm into any detail or any color on my model, I just want to make sure that when my brain registers the silhouette, right, does it see a tiger? Does it see a teddy bear? Right? Is it something that I would be afraid of in the dark, or is it something inviting? Right? Those kind of subconscious vibes that we get tell us a lot about the character without us maybe consciously registering it. So this is also why, I'm going to try stick with the traditional kind of witch's hat shape, right? And now I did say that I wanted to go like an oversized hat, so maybe accentuate that. And again, remembering that I don't want to do all this in Maya. That's like the last place that I want to be when I am making changes or trying to figure something out, right? In here, I can quickly change the shape of a hat or an element like the shoulder pads, right? Without having to think about what tool I'm going to use and what direction it's flying in, right? And where the angles are, where my edge loops are, right? All that information is too technical, and it's going to make the creative process much harder. I'd rather stick within something more basic like a sketching program and try to work out these decisions at a more general scale, right? Now you can also get into the Photoshop tools, right? Like I can transform things and I can resize if I want to experiment with different sort of proportions. Right? I don't necessarily have to just be using pen and pencil. For this character, I did say that I wanted to have a bit of an hourglass figure, at least to accentuate some femininity, but not too sexy, just enough to sell it as a female, right? So, people complain about AI is so bad at hands. It's like, all right, well, let's see your hands. Like, let's see how well you can draw a hand. It's not easy, right? These things take some time and effort. So, I like that. These kind of buckles along the hat as well. It's kind of giving it like an eye, right? So also be aware of shapes that are face-like, right? Sometimes good to reinforce parts of your model, other times are going to simply be a distraction for the viewer and will grab the viewer's attention away from other things. So now I'm considering, an accent color or a secondary color or items that might not be a part of the main geometry, right, that I can add on as accessories. Once again, spikes for evil characters, rounder shapes for friendly characters. I kind of like a portal shape as well, maybe in her hat, like a rounded off triangle. And she's already got a bit of an imposing figure here, right? Like those spikes are doing a lot to make her seem more vicious. So experiment with your line work as well, right? Different lines will have different personalities or different vibes to them once they take shape. I do like these flared bits at the wrist, though. Those are quite interesting. Adds like another area to reinforce shapes or to experiment, right? So this is one reason why I like the AI generators, is because it does give you lots of ideas to pick and choose from, things that might not occur to you when you're first doing your design, right? That some might just be things that don't normally exist in real life or don't exist at least in the modern world, right? Some more historical outfits and things that we might not be familiar with might be caught by a more experienced artist, which then the AI, right, has added to its own database. Things within the silhouette, right? Trying to outline things to see if it's that the outline isn't working, or if it is just perhaps it's this repeating shape down here, right? That is now getting repeated here in the arm region. You want to have a mix of rounded and sharp areas, though. Like, you don't necessarily want everything to have like super hard spikes all over it, right? Like one of the tips that I've got from my painting professors, right, is to let the eye rest in certain places. So even just to have some areas that are maybe a bit simpler. Also, you find on the human body that there are often hard edges, say like at the knee, right? The knee is going to be a rounded shape, followed by a hard shape for the shin, and then a rounded shape for the ankle, and then more of a hard shape for the foot, right? And then rounded shapes for the toes and things. So there's this balance or this alternation of things that are rounder, things connected to things that are straighter, followed by things that are rounder again, right? So we try to capture some of that balance even in a character like this, where it's got an outfit on top of it. Now, there are some elements in this dress that I liked that I haven't captured yet. I'm not sure if it's this exposed collarbone shape, maybe that's giving a nice bit of balance there. It's almost like a star here. Which is, having some relation to the Wiccan star, right? Upside down star. Other stuff that I liked in some other models were like high collars. Could think about doing a collar on the back. But that area might just be a bit too busy right now. Like this area here has a lot of detail versus not much around here, right? So a lot of these designs had kind of corset shapes or split seams along this sort of region. I do like some of these reinforcements here with the diamond shapes. Had this interesting, like, kind of spider legs kind of sense, right? Like that there are legs underneath here, and I did want to make her a little more creepy, right? So maybe even accentuating some of that at the bottom. That maybe it starts out square. Almost like a spider's, not pincers, but mouth over here. I've seen a lot of spider witches in video games, from like, I think Diablo, and Ghostbusters had one, so it's a bit of a trope at this point. I don't want to lean too heavily into that, but I can create that sense of like creepiness, right, by just grabbing some of those elements. Also noticing that even though I made her hat straight up and down, the artwork that I liked actually had the kind of worn and bent kind of hat style. Again, going from like maybe harder edges, right, or like harder sections, or balancing out hardness and softness here. In some cases, you want to think about muscles and kind of relaxing one side and hardening the other side, right? Because in, say, if you have a bone, right, arm bone or a leg bone, and then you have a muscle on it, right? Say when one side is, well, it would be attached to a second bone. When one side is being flexed, right, the other side here is relaxed, right? Bones all work like this, where the muscle on the opposite side will not be in action, right? Will be flatter when the muscle on the opposite side is tense, so that way the joint will bend, right? Say if I was, if I had two bones, right? So this would be, say, like this is the arm bone or something. All right, I've got the arm here. This muscle would be drawing or lifting up part of the arm, right? But in order for it to do that, this muscle has to be relaxed, right? Versus if this muscle, say in this case, if this is the arm bone, this would be the bicep, right? This would be the tricep. So when one is being flexed, the other goes limp. That allows that motion across the whole body. So we do have to worry or watch in the figure for that balance of round shapes on one side versus flatter shapes on the other side. So sometimes if something's not feeling right, try adding a bit of sharpness on the opposite side to where you have a bit of roundness, and see if that's possibly causing that feeling of discomfort or of unease. So just picking through, making sure that I'm tapping some of the other ideas, maybe that were in concept art, right, to see and to kind of make them more my own, so that nobody can say like, well, all you did was take the AI art and then it did all the work, right? Like, you don't want to have something that's purely something else's, possibly. So even adding a hat or changing something up in the design can help take more ownership of it and solidify some of those design elements in your head. So again, you have to love your character in order to work through this process. It's too long and difficult of a workflow, right? To go from 2D to like an orthographic, right? To then a base mesh to clothing, right? Clothed to then the one that everyone likes to block out of their mind, UV unwrapping, right? And then skinning, potentially like rig, right? An animation, possibly swapping that up and doing your texture first, right? Then skin, animation. So in order to make it through all of these hours, right, even if you're super pro and each step only takes you an hour, right, it's a long process. More likely, you're going to have some areas that cause you more trouble, right? Say if you're not so strong in 2D, or if UV unwrapping is going to take you longer, right? Like all these, maybe doubling or tripling the amount of time for those areas. It is quite a long process. So be ready for it by just falling in love with your design, right? And let it live in your heart, right? In your brain. If you're going home or you're laying down, right, and like all you can think about is a different character or something else that's better, right? Maybe this isn't the character that you want to be making. You can still change your design, right, up to the nth hour. But generally, if you're at the base mesh stage, that's kind of like your place to call it for yes or no, right? Like, am I in love with this design, or would I rather be doing something else? For me, the other design that I've been kicking around in my head was kind of the antithesis of this character, which, let me just go ahead, since I have my main character now, D to go default colors, and expand my artwork here. Right, I kind of was looking at doing more of a witch hunter character, and I thought of them as like wearing like a big kind of like a mask to mask off their face, but also doing kind of a female character, and using more kind of square shapes, as in like someone who's very rigid and follows the law to the letter, right? Like the Spanish Inquisition kind of thing, like that they're dangerous not because of their personal beliefs or their personal reasons. They're dangerous because they live within this like rigid hierarchy, right? And everything is very by the letter and by the books. So the other concepts that I had were more for like an executioner type of character, like a big old like mace or something, or a paddle, right? Basically, they're gonna roam the countryside and seek out witches in order to punish them. In this case, probably to kill them, right? So some of my other concept designs had more of that going on, and it was similar to a character in Darkest Dungeon. Was kind of the vibe that I was going for. I can show you some of those concepts as well. So these were what the AI had sped out for me, right? Like kind of a nun style outfit, and this kind of superhero pose, right? Like an imposing character, but one that you wouldn't want to be on their bad side because they're probably gonna bring the hammer down, right? And punish you. So thought about doing one of these, like a warrior nun. Go watch the Netflix show if you're curious about that, because one of my friends actually works on the show called Warrior Nun. I think she is a director. The show. Can we get to the info? Show is right here on Netflix, Warrior Nun. It's a bit silly, but it's got some interesting stuff on there as well. So maybe that's where that idea came from, of like an offensive character, right? Like a battle mage, but for the church, right? Now I wouldn't necessarily lean into the Christendom too hard or at all, right? I actually prefer the designs that forgo the typical crucifix and do it more like in a fantasy world, right? You might have mages and witches, but then you might also have what would they be called? Like another spiritual branch, right? That is more for the people and less individualistic, right? So not something that you would see as often, but it would require a little bit more tact in order to not be offensive in a sense, right? Not be too Christian, and not pull too many things from, an existing archetype that exists in the real world, right? Where lots of people will have lots of existing opinions on it. A priesthood, I guess it would be in a fantasy series, right? Sometimes you have a generic sort of priesthood class or group that maybe worships a specific god within that fantasy realm. But you can still bring in some of the tropes from the nun's garb if you were going to go for something similar. But so far, I'm getting pretty pleased with the results here. These areas I'm still like a bit unsure of there. Excuse me, and also maybe adding in the design that I had in a few, where I had more of a external skirt above the dress, right? But I'm not sure if that'll go into like two full-length pieces here. Sorry, I don't know my fashion terminology well enough to express myself in these areas. Again, why the AI is helpful to me for this particular phase, just because I'm not as versed in historic or traditional sort of women's clothing. Oh, this can be cool, like a kind of rib cage effect. Right, anytime that you can reinforce anatomy on the clothing, right, can have really cool results. Spikes, those twos. And once again, right, don't feel like you only have to work on the line work. I didn't go into this character, you know, drawing their face and then like getting their shoulders and then like worrying about like, do I know the shape of their arm, right? Like, and then I've got all these weird lines and I'm gonna feel bad about my drawing, and you know, like you start being like, I can't draw. Don't go around the outside of your character. Rather do a mix of large shapes and then chopping away at them, right? Using the eraser to kind of hone in on something that when you kind of unfocus your eyes, that it creates that effect that you were hoping for. Again, the last thing you want to do is be making these decisions in Maya because that is going to be so exhausting. Better to test things out inside of Photoshop or any other app that you're going to feel like you can work quickly, right? Make quick changes, because you never know, it could just be, you know, one simple stroke that changes the vibe of the character for you. And if you can capture that without being bogged down in a technical kind of workspace, you know, that's gonna help you. I'm really maybe over reliant on cool shoulder pads for my characters. I tend to put pauldrons on all my fantasy characters, at least. Maybe I need to scale that back a little bit. Anyway, I'm getting more pleased with this right now. Again, once I've got some work done, I'll often do a pass on the proportions just to see if things are the shape that, you know, the overall silhouette is working for me. Also, zooming out, right, and making sure that the character looks interesting from afar and that you're not too reliant on like close-up details is also an important part of painting that we take through into the digital realm, right? This is getting extra creepy if she's quite tall. Get some Lady Dimitrescu vibes. Now these aren't her legs here, just keeping in mind that this is just a design on the front, but it does get a little bit creepy when they appear to be floating. Just because now that's forming, like, right at the crotch here is forming like a leg shape. So I just need to be wary of that element, you know, that it is now. Informing where the bottom of the crotch is, that I might, you know, be adding anatomy without really intending to. But again, like, sometimes using elements that sit on top of the anatomy can lend themselves to improving your work. So yeah, the taller version, I think, Slightly taller is quite nice. Also, see if we can go even bigger on the hat, or if it needs to come in a bit. Notice I can change the anchor point. I can scale down, see like, okay, it looks more traditional. Scale it up, see where that takes me. Too much. Right? Middle ground actually quite nice. Again, softer shapes, right? This curve here softening out the hard shapes right there. Now the silhouette kind of being the softer shapes. Maybe I need to have softer shapes in the center here. Maybe that's what's not feeling quite right about these diamond shapes, right? It's becoming more like a bat shape here in the front. Followed by a nice soft line, right? The curve of this line being soft, balanced out by sharpness. So feeling pretty happy with her right there. Gonna go ahead and save and walk away from this for a while and come back to it with fresh eyes. This is another important step in making art. If you don't want to get too zoomed in, right, too focused on it, you want to think about big picture things first and let it kind of seep into your mind, right? Like to let it live inside your brain before you make any final commitments, right? Because this is how characters exist in our imagination, right? If I tell you to picture Mario, right, you've got an idea of what that character looks like in your head, and it is probably slightly different to what I picture him as, or what the box art pictures him as, right? Like there's an element of imagination involved when you start talking about character design. For me, my next step is going to be to tag, to capture the side view and possibly the back view. In order to reach that next step, I'm going to start dragging in either using rulers, so Control R in Photoshop, and then using the Move tool, clicking and dragging on the ruler will let me capture the main landmarks across the body, right? Things that I'm gonna have to match in the side view, like the bottom of the arms, maybe the top of the hips, right? The bottom of the crotch, if that's where that is, the overall height of the character, right? And maybe a guesstimate of where the knees are going to be. I should probably add some knees in here. Also keeping in mind that I am potentially faking things, right? Or I'm cheating by working in 2D. Don't forget that you're hiding some things, right, in your 2D artwork that need to be explained in 3D. Say, for example, this cool looking shoulder pad here, like, what does that really look like from the side? Like, you need to be the one to work out, you know, does it come to a point here? Does it actually differ from your front model, right? Because working that stuff out in 3D, again, is quite tedious and difficult. So the more stuff that we can start to figure out in 2D, the better. I can also cheat a little bit perhaps and grab say like some of these accessory ideas that I had. I actually think I'm probably gonna make this candelabra sword thing. This thing is cool. I can start to see if these are working with the existing character potentially, and what the size would be on this weapon. Yeah. So even though I haven't worked out the face and things like that, again, I could just stay in this kind of like jamming mode and like start working on the side perspective. Right, the more reference I have, the easier that's going to go, and the more I understand my human anatomy, right, like the more I can start to build out the pelvis here and capture the head and things, right? So like that's going to also require me to be quite warmed up. So like I said, usually I'll take a break after making some progress, just not to tire myself out. Come back with fresh eyes. But this will kind of be my next step, is figuring out the side view, right? Now, it might be the case that if you've got some artwork from the side, that you might want to start bringing that in, line it up, and using that as a reference. But again, as often as possible, rather draw next to your reference, right? Rather than on top of it. We don't want to get into the habit of tracing things, because if you do that in the real world and your boss catches you, you might get fired, right? So now you can make some decisions. Your character. Let's do proportions. But again, working in silhouette just to make this a bit simpler. Don't want to get too carried away with drawing details like a foot, right? And then coming back and checking the anatomy. So also potentially going back to more anatomical reference for the stage, right? If you're going to try and capture something more realistic. Also making decisions now of what's going to come later in 3D. Is this character going to be modeled all as one chunk, or will they have, like with the clothing, as part of the main model, or am I going to model all of this anatomy underneath? Those are the kinds of decisions I should start making now. So again, I'm going to save out. Good luck, guys. Hopefully your process is going okay and that you're feeling good about your characters. But it does help to go through the 2D stage and working out your final design in orthographic before you jump into the base mesh, before we get too far into 3D. Just to make sure that the vibe of the character is captured in the silhouette itself, right? That you're not too dependent on like giving them a mean face or like a big ball of magic that's gonna like tell you all about the character, right? Like you can have those details in there, but everything should complement each other, right? It should all be in balance. So thanks, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.